Hey guys, as you may have seen on the introduction to Getting Lost number 12, I have decided to start a sub-series of videos as kind of follow-up videos to my Getting Lost entries. The general idea is that 1 year after a Getting Lost video goes up, I will release a follow-up that addresses the many perspectives, questions, etc. that you guys bring up in the comment section. As I said in my announcement for this sub-series, you guys tend to contribute points and counterpoints that I often feel are worthy of addressing, and since I can't go back and put them into the video as it exists, I figured this would be kind of a cool way to address those things. So yeah, this first installment is meant to address my very first Getting Lost video, obviously, which was my vaccines and quarantines one. Now this probably goes without saying, but if you have not seen that video yet, you probably want to do that before watching this one. I can't imagine this video would be in any way worthwhile without having seen that video first. So yeah, if you haven't seen that, just click the link right up here. But all right, let's get into it.
Hello, my name is Dr. Carl Candlepine, and this is the orientation film.
That's why in today's video we're going to talk about why it said quarantine on the inside of the hatch door, as well as what those vials of vaccine were. So I'm probably going to be criticizing the quality of this quite a bit. And yeah, right out of the gate, I have to say that my framing here is not very good. I remember when I first started, I was propping my phone up on a couple of boxes on this desk. And yeah, I don't know why I thought that was good enough, but yeah, it's kind of awkward. I think I've gotten it a little bit better. I'm still not a professional by any means, but yeah.
The DHARMA Initiative. For those that may need refreshing, the initiative came to the island to pursue several fields of scientific research.
Okay, so if you guys wondered what the big black blob on the board was, when I first started doing these videos, I didn't have an eraser for that chalkboard wall, and I was using a wet sponge, and for whatever reason, I guess I couldn't wait for it to dry. Or I didn't think it was that noticeable. I don't know. It was a year ago. These earlier videos are also kind of cringy as far as quality. And on that note, let's go to our first comment. Also, fair warning, I'm probably going to mispronounce some, if not all of these usernames. But user Perkacube commented, "Good video. Only complaint is that the orange felt a bit too constant in the filmy look." Yeah, so I had virtually no editing experience when I first started making these, or even recording experience. So I knew my editing was going to be really choppy. So it occurred to me to kind of shoot these in the style of the DHARMA orientation films, where obviously those are really choppy for, the reason being that things have been spliced out, or, they've been eroded or whatever. I thought that would be kind of a clever way to cover for the choppy editing and me constantly having to do retakes and whatever. So in order to fit that style, I decided I needed to have a filter that would make it look like it was an old-timey film. And at the time, that was the only filter that was on the editing app that I was using. And yes, I do acknowledge that it is very annoying and distracting. It is unfortunately on my first 5 Getting Lost videos. After that, I finally had one that was hopefully less annoying. I mean, it's definitely less frenetic. But yeah.
The initiative came to the island to pursue several fields of scientific research. These included zoology, electromagnetism, psychology, and parapsychology. Among many others.
Okay, so that bit, I'm still really proud of the idea of that bit. Unfortunately, my execution of it wasn't the best. I definitely could have paced it better. But yeah, those are my dogs, Tina and Nala, my friend Jenny, my sister Emily, and my friend Sean. They were all kind enough to willingly appear in that little skit. Apart from the dogs, that is, I don't think that they realized that they were being filmed.
Swan Station was designed to be a research facility where Dharma could experiment with one of the unique pockets of electromagnetism located on the island. However,
I like how you can see the black blob on the board just slowly fading away.
one of the most intriguing parts of this routine comes near the end of the sequence where we see Desmond inject himself with some sort of vaccine, of which he seems to have a vast supply.
So the reason that that music just like barely starts up and then cuts out is because originally it was just that clip with the full audio, but when I uploaded it to YouTube, I got a copyright notice or whatever, and basically the best option that it gave me was to just mute the audio, which is obviously the one that I went with. But yeah, it does make that little clip a little more jarring. I feel like that film sound is way too loud on this video. I know, I don't remember at what point I started lowering the volume on that, but yeah, it does seem a little bit distracting here. I know a year later my video quality is still pretty amateurish, but yeah, I do feel like I've improved considerably from these early days, and it is a bit embarrassing looking back on these.
In this case, let's go back to December 19th, 1992. The day of the Purge.
Okay, so that brings me to Pokey the Turtle's comment. They actually had 3 points they wanted to bring up, and I will be coming back to the other two. But yeah, their first point, basically, I'm just going to read it. There were just a couple of things I wanted to note in the video. The first was the date of the Purge. I know this question is heavily debated, but I personally think that the date was December 19th, 1987. And then they go on to list there's several very valid reasons for questioning the date being 1992. This was actually one of the things that I was most looking forward to addressing in a follow-up video. But I quickly realized that whole, and analyzing all of the information and factors and figuring out which date's more likely, that is definitely worthy enough and substantial enough that it deserves its own Getting Lost video. And that's why I've decided to make that my very next topic. So yeah, instead of making this follow-up video that frankly most people probably aren't going to bother watching, instead of making it super long and addressing all of that, I'm just going to make an entire video about that. So yeah, I'm not ignoring this comment. I actually find it worthy of a full video to address it.
We see Ben put on a gas mask before using a gas canister to kill his father.
I've always enjoyed Roger's complete lack of a reaction to Ben putting on a gas mask.
So maybe instead, on the day of the Purge, you go to the Swan and you warn the two occupants. You tell them they'll be spared, so long as they keep doing their job.
Okay, so this is probably a good time to address this comment by John. You really think the others knew of the Swan? I like to think they had no idea about it, but you make a valid point that they did go to the station with the cameras. But I would say if they really thought the job was so important, they would have taken over the station to ensure they were in full control. Or is that why Ben got caught? Because he learned that the survivors had made it to the Swan, or was he trying to locate the Swan? Okay, so do I really think that they knew about the Swan? I do, yes. As I discuss in Getting Lost number 12, Changing Rules, I think that the Purge occurred on island and off. There's actually a fair amount of evidence of this, as I mentioned in that video. And the amount of infiltration that would require means that surely someone that turned knew about the Swan Station and what its function was, and etc. Furthermore, in the season 5 premiere, Juliet knew of the Swan's location despite never having been there on screen, and despite not having joined the camp until well after it had been destroyed.
There's a DHARMA station 15 minutes from here.
You mean the hatch? The one we blew up?
The fact that she knew exactly where it was at means that the others probably did. A flimsier piece of evidence is that Ben really did push the button during the lockdown. This suggests to me he knew it really was important. Then again, I could see the argument that he just did it because, why not? If he doesn't know what it's going to do, better safe than sorry, you might as well press it. So like I said, that point's a little bit flimsier. As far as the fact that they went to the station with the cameras, i.e. the Pearl Station.
That him? Shepard?
Yes.
I do think that's probably the strongest bit of supporting evidence that the others always knew of the Swan and its occupants. Also, as we see when Ben meets Saeed off island in season 4, the story he tells Saeed about how he left the island is that he took the Elizabeth, and he even says that was Desmond's boat.
I came across the Syrian border. It's really not as difficult.
How
as
did you get off the island?
Your friend Desmond had a boat. Remember the Elizabeth? I followed a heading to Fiji. Then I chartered a plane.
Which indicates to me that he knew all along about Desmond and how he got to the island. Similar to how he knew all about the 815ers. And the only way he really could have done that is from knowing of his arrival via the surveillance, and then having Mikhail research him again the same way that he did with the 815ers. Moving on to the part where John says, but I would say if they really thought that job was so important, they would have taken over the station to ensure they were in full control. So yes, I absolutely see where John is coming from on this. And my answer for why they didn't do that relies mostly on my own personal headcanon. And that gets tricky for a couple of reasons. Obviously, I don't want to dive fully into that. I would love to tell that story at some point. It requires more of a storytelling approach, in my opinion, in order to do it justice. Let's just put it that way. But essentially, I think allowing Radzinsky to live was really Ben's way of condemning him to this fate, as a way of punishing Radzinsky for his role in certain things. If you've seen my video called The Non-Productive System, then you will know that I believe there's overwhelming evidence that the Swan's creation and function is what's causing the fertility issues. The fact that energy is being discharged every 104-ish minutes for years, I think that is what is causing pregnant women to die. If you haven't seen that video, I fully explain that there. And I have actually come to believe that this is what happened to Annie. That basically in 1985, when she and Ben were about 20, I think she got pregnant with Ben's child, and I think she died as a result of what DHARMA has done to the island. Now, I have to give credit to the person that originally pointed out what I now see as the obvious conclusion. to reach regarding what happened to Annie. And that is Reddit user Petricore02. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. But yeah, I discovered one of the Reddit posts about a year ago that mentioned that, and it was one of those moments where things just clicked, where it's like I already had certain pieces of what I thought happened, and then when they pointed that out, I was like, suddenly it all clicked, and everything flowed much better in my head. To quote part of what they said in that Reddit comment, Annie dying from Ben getting her pregnant would explain so much about why Ben is obsessed with the pregnancy problem, with not letting go of Juliet, with keeping Alex as his own child, etc. This statement is what immediately had me on board with this idea. And since then, I've come to interpret the portrait that Ben has in his house to represent Annie and the very small, fragile creature that she's holding right next to her womb. I think that that is a representation of the child that Ben lost as well when Annie died. And while I do agree that Annie would likely have been evacuated with the other women and children in 1977, I also think it's likely that several of those women and children came back after the incident. Obviously, we know that Charlotte and Miles didn't, but I think it's perfectly reasonable that some of the more essential workers that stayed behind would have wanted their families to come back after the immediate threat was gone. So yes, I think Annie was probably evacuated, but I think she came back and this was her ultimate fate. But yeah, so basically I think 1985, that's when Annie died because of the fertility issues caused by Radzinsky. And I think that that had a big impact on Ben, and why, obviously we're shown as a kid, he doesn't really want to go back to Dharma. He wants to stay with the hostiles. But I think once he went back, things were a little bit more complicated. I think his dad was still a horrible father, but as you see in season 5, after Ben's shot, he seems to have a lot of remorse over the type of father he's been. And I think that their relationship probably improved somewhat after that. And then I think that Ben still had Annie there. And basically, I think that over those next 15 years, Ben was kind of in this awkward position of having people that he cared about on both sides. People within the group of the hostiles that he grew to care about, and then people in Dharmaville that he also cared about. And so he's in this awkward position where he doesn't even know where his loyalty really lies. And he kind of has to play both sides for a while. I actually think that kind of explains why he's so good at lying. And I think it's kind of an interesting, the idea that he grew up just constantly having to lie to both sides, kind of, hide his true intentions from everyone. Like I said, I don't think he became a bad person until after the Purge, but like the idea that was kind of what his life was, that kind of explains why he becomes such a master at manipulating people and deceiving them, obviously. Anyways, my point is, I think that when Annie died, again, because of what Dharma did, specifically Radzinsky and his role in the incident, I think that had a great impact on which side Ben ultimately came down on. And I think that Ben let him live as a sort of punishment. He presents it as mercy, but really he's condemning him to this really awful existence of, that alarm going off every 100-ish minutes, him not being able to go super far out, knowing that he's the one that, created this horrible system, and the knowledge that he won't ever escape, basically. And then obviously we know how that turns out with Radzinsky's suicide. So yeah, that's basically my answer for why Ben and his people didn't kill Radzinsky and Kelvin, the way they killed all the other Dharma people, and then take over the Swan themselves and just rotate out of there. I basically think it was sort of his revenge against Radzinsky. Now, that may not be the most compelling counterpoint to the criticism of the idea that the others left Radzinsky alive, because it's not rooted in fact. It's rooted in, my headcanon, basically. But personally, I think that's a really compelling answer to what was going on, and it fits within the context of the facts. It makes sense. It all adds up. Again, the way I see it, it does anyways. But yeah, in my opinion, that's a really compelling story that I would love to tell at some point. But okay, returning to John's last part of his comment, or is that why Ben got caught? Because he learned that the survivors had made it to the Swan? Or was he trying to locate the hatch? So I have two videos that I have been kind of putting off because I know they're going to be huge. My longest videos so far have all been ones that I thought were going to be really easy and quick to make. And then they've turned into, one of my longest ones. There are these two videos that I know already are going to be long, so I can't even imagine how long they're actually going to be if I already think that. But yeah, basically one of them is about Charles Widmore and what was going on with him in the last season. A lot of people have questions, which rightfully so. There's a lot that doesn't make sense there as far as what we're told on the surface and what he actually does. There's a lot that doesn't add up there. But that video is going to be a really, really long one. The other one is what exactly was going on with Ben when he gets captured by Russo in the net, and when he gets brought to the Swan, and why he chooses Henry Gale as his cover, and yeah, basically just what was going on that whole time, what the plan was, what the little adjustments were as certain things didn't pan out the way that he expected them to. Like I said, I have a whole video that's basically Ben and his people's perspective of what was going on for the last half of season 2. And I know that one's going to be long as well. But yes, I do plan on getting to both of those things, especially that second one about Ben, probably in the next few months. Basically, I don't think that he got caught because he was looking for the hatch. I know that kind of gets in the audience's head a little bit when Locke asks that. Locke asks if he was looking for that place. But I do not think that is why he got caught at all. I will eventually, in the next few months, explain why I think he got caught. Okay, so John's comment there actually kind of transitions us kind of nicely back to Pokey the Turtle's second point. So yeah, I'm going to read that now. The second thing I wanted to note was Ben's knowledge of the Swan. I think it's possible that Ben learned of the Swan during his time in Dharma, but I don't think he ever learned of the Swan's true purpose or importance. That being that the button must be pushed or the entire island, maybe more, would blow up. Which I don't actually think that it would blow up, and maybe they don't either. I think that might just be their simplification of it. I think that if the Swan pocket of energy, which is essentially the same as the source, it's just kind of all the same bit of electromagnetism, all of that is connected to the other pockets of electromagnetism around the world. Eloise tells us that in the episode 316 at the lamppost station. Basically, I think if that pocket is left unchecked, it will cause a chain reaction that will cause that will affect the other pockets around the world, and basically just lead to great ecological disaster. Anyways, back to the comment about thinking that Ben doesn't know of the true importance or purpose of the Swan. I say this because I feel like if he knew of the importance of the button, he wouldn't have placed doubt in John's mind about whether he should keep pushing it or not, like he did. I understand Ben wanted to mess with John, but I don't think he would risk the survival of the entire island for it. So yeah, that is all a really good point, but there are a few reasons that I disagree. Again, I point to the fact that he did end up pressing the button when he crawled through the vents. Although, again, I have to acknowledge that maybe he just did that because, why not? Better safe than sorry. But even if that is the case, that still kind of works toward my point here. If he thought it was better to be safe than sorry because he didn't know either way of whether or not the button was important, then wouldn't he still be risking something by telling John that the button is in fact meaningless? Because again, if he thought it was worth pressing the button to be safe, then in his mind, he's not being safe by telling him not to press, that the button isn't real, because then John might not press it. I feel like I didn't phrase that in the best way, but hopefully that made sense. But yeah, I think he did lie to John simply to undermine him. I think he assumed, quite accurately actually, based on what we see happen after that, that certain survivors would continue pressing it in Locke's place. And that's actually true. We actually see that Echo takes over, and that even before that, the survivors were still taking shifts once Locke kind of went back to the beach and was telling Rose that he's done with the hatch. People were still pressing it. So the idea that he would undermine Locke and get him to lose faith in the island and everything wouldn't have necessarily meant that the button doesn't get pushed and then the island is at risk. The problem was that what Ben didn't see coming was Locke doing a complete 180 and actively working to prevent the button from getting pushed. Ben is a master manipulator. He's very good at predicting outcomes and what people will do and what their behavior will be. That said, he's not omniscient. He's not perfect. He does make miscalculations sometimes. One example is Juliet's loyalty. He was not expecting her to betray him, even though in retrospect, it's kind of likely that would happen. Another example is Kimi's threatening of Alex. He didn't take that seriously, and obviously Alex wound up dead because of that. So yeah, Ben is far from infallible. And I think this is one of the times where his manipulations had an unintended consequence, that being that Locke actively tries to stop the button from getting pushed and succeeds.
He's also extremely aggressive and confrontational, especially when it comes to the hostiles, or at least he is in the 70s.
Okay, so I'm sure I don't need to keep going on and on about how awful the quality here is. I did want to also make some excuses for the legibility. First of all, my handwriting is atrocious. It always has been. That said, I was using a blue chalk in these first two videos before I switched to a white, which I think is a little bit easier to see. Also, that wall with the chalkboard paint, it's not very smooth, which makes it hard to write on. And chalk in general is hard to write legibly. I'd like to think that most of my videos, you guys can read what I'm writing. I do know that in number 12, changing rules, I made the little boxes a little too small, so my writing was really cramped and I think harder to read. So yeah, aside from that one recent one, I'd like to think, you guys can read what it is I'm writing. Feel free to let me know if that's not the case.
If only there was some secret military fort Dharma had hidden away.
So that bit just reminded me of actually another argument for why the others would almost certainly have known about the Swan. We know that they've taken over the Flame and that they have Mikhail stationed there. And we see in the episode Enter 7-7 that in the basement, all of the blueprints and electrical maps, what have you, for for basically all of the Dharma stations seem to be down there. Now, I guess you could argue that if the Swan was top secret, that maybe the blueprints wouldn't be down there. But yeah, just taken with everything else, I don't find that super likely. Recording this has taken a little longer than I thought because I am rambling. But yeah, so that's why it's getting dark, and I've turned on a light, which looks like the battery might be dying. So yeah, might have to turn on another one. Anyways.
So now, let us put ourselves in Kelvin's shoes. You're left alone pushing the button, until one day you find Desmond and his boat. In that moment, you decide to lie to this man in order to make your escape. You tell him the boat is gone. You tell him the quarantine is for some deadly airborne pathogen. You tell him the mysterious vaccine is for said pathogen. You tell him he can never go outside.
On the subject of Kelvin and his many lies, that brings us to a question from Jared Millirons. Was Kelvin ever specifically revealed to be Dharma? So this is an interesting question to consider. Kelvin says that he joined Dharma.
But then, thank God, I joined the DHARMA Initiative. Namaste, thank you, and good luck.
And his dishonesty aside, I am inclined to believe that for a few reasons. Mainly, he is clearly not in league with the hostiles, as he calls them. He is seen trying to leave the island in the Elizabeth boat, which if he is willingly working with the hostiles, obviously he wouldn't be trying to escape. And we find out in season 3 that Ben did not know that the boat was still around.
And they have a sailboat.
Oh.
Which again tells us that Kelvin and the others are not on the same page. So if he isn't willingly working for them, the next possibility is that they recruited or abducted him from the mainland just to throw him down there indefinitely and have him press the button indefinitely. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If it were between that and rotating their own people out of there, I think the latter would make a lot more sense in that circumstance. So eliminating that possibility as well really just leaves one other one aside from him legitimately being DHARMA Initiative. And that possibility is that he crashed similar to Desmond, and Radzinsky found him the way he found Desmond. My problem with that, though, is that I don't see any apparent motive for why Kelvin would lie about that, or why he would make up some story about joining the DHARMA Initiative. As we've discussed, Kelvin clearly does lie to Desmond about quite a few things, but all of them, there's very understandable reasons for why he did. It all serves a purpose that he is working towards, mainly to escape. And him telling him that he was part of the DHARMA Initiative when he wasn't, and for whatever reason hiding the fact that he crashed the way Desmond did, I don't see how that serves his agenda in any way. So yeah, I also don't find that particularly likely. So taking all of that into account, I think the most reasonable conclusion is that, yes, he really was a member of the DHARMA Initiative. I do think he was one of the last ones brought to the island, based on the fact that we see him in the Gulf War, which is in 91.
It's over. We're pulling out, not going to Baghdad.
And if the Purge occurred in 92, then yeah, he came very much towards the end of the initiative's existence. Okay, finally resorted to turning the light on. But yeah, just to finish that thought on Kelvin, I think he was a recruit of DHARMA, and I think he just happened to be the one that had the misfortune of being down there with Radzinsky at the time of the Purge.
I propose it is a legitimate medication designed to combat the effects of the close proximity to such high levels of electromagnetism and radiation. This would also explain why Ethan is seen using the same vials on Claire when she is pregnant.
And that brings us back to Pokey the Turtle's third and final point. Lastly, I wanted to bring up the serum that Juliet injected Claire with in One of Us. It appeared to be the same substance that Ethan gave Claire in maternity leave, which, considering that it's the same thing Desmond injected himself with, was likely manufactured by DHARMA. But Juliet claims it's the serum she developed. Do you think all of that was part of her lie? Do you think it was the same substance as the other injections? Do you think it actually had any effect on Claire's recovery? Basically, just wondering about your thoughts on that. So yeah, I think they pretty much nailed it. I think the implant was probably never going to kill Claire. I think what we saw it do, as far as causing the nosebleed, the hemorrhaging, and her, I think she had a fever. I think that was all it was ever going to do. I think that if Sawyer and Saeed had actually prevented Juliet from returning with the case, then Claire would have improved exactly as she did, and Juliet would have lost that chance to ingratiate herself with the survivors. That said, I don't think they would have necessarily jumped to the conclusion that the others had somehow manufactured Claire's symptoms from afar, which is why I'm pretty sure the implant wouldn't have been lethal. That there wouldn't really have been anything to gain by risking Claire's life in that way. In fact, to go further with that, if Claire had died because Sawyer and Saeed had stopped Juliet from coming back, I think Juliet would still be the one that gets blamed after claiming that it was her treatment that caused it. So yeah, not only would there be nothing to gain from activating an implant that would kill Claire, that would possibly kill Claire, it would actually endanger the whole operation. So no, I think that the implant was just meant to make her symptomatic, and the symptoms would fade away on their own. And I do think they faded on their own. I think that what Juliet injects her with did absolutely nothing as far as relieving her symptoms. It was all just part of the ruse for Juliet to quickly gain some trust of the survivors. Okay, so I had finished filming several hours ago and was in the process of editing when, coincidentally, I got another comment on vaccines and quarantines, which, as a year-old video, I don't usually get comments on that a lot, so it was kind of crazy odds that came in right as I was making this video. But since they got it right under the wire, I figured I would address that in this video too. So okay, this comes from username, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, it's IVNDRMNC. If you talked about this and I just missed/forgot it, I apologize. But one thing I don't think you specifically addressed in this video is the seeming contradiction of Desmond's actions the day he kills Kelvin versus the day the 815ers breach and enter the hatch. Regardless of whether the quarantine was a hoax or not, and regardless of the true content or purpose of the vaccine, it seems that Desmond, upon seeing Kelvin strip his hazmat gear, would believe the whole thing was a hoax, or at least was no longer applicable. Yet in Season 2, Episode 1, Desmond is shown still taking the vaccine, and when Locke et al. Enter the hatch, Desmond asks them how many of the 815ers have gotten sick, and at least appears to be surprised/confused to hear none of them have been affected. I've been confused by this for a while before watching this and thinking about it more deeply. And then this user actually goes on to give some pretty good answers for their own question, or maybe not question, just the point that they bring up. And I actually do feel like I can contribute some helpful insight into this. So yeah, the things to note about what happens with Kelvin on the day that he dies and when Desmond realizes that he's been lying to him about at least a few things. Kelvin actually invites Desmond to run away with him, at which point Desmond asks, "What about the button?" And Kelvin responds by saying, "Who knows if it's real?" Desmond comes back with, "Well, that's not what you were saying when you're going on and on about fail-safes and electromagnetic dams." And Kelvin shrugs that off with, "Well, I was drunk." What this tells us is that in regards to the button, even Kelvin doesn't know what he believes. And yes, it would make sense that immediately following that interaction that Desmond would think everything was a lie. But then he gets back to the hatch and all hell is breaking loose. And in that moment when the computer won't accept the code, he's freaking out, he's panicking. In that moment, he likely thinks that he's going to die. But then, miraculously, the computer finally accepts the code and things go back to normal. Now, after that day where he found out that Kelvin was lying to him about the boat and about being able to breathe the open air without any obvious side effects, combined with then seeing very real, very scary consequences to not pressing the button on time, Desmond is likely very uncertain about what to believe was true and what was a lie. And as that user themselves went on to point out, the vaccines were still coming in the pallet drops, which obviously Kelvin wasn't ever orchestrating that. So yeah, it just becomes very unclear what to believe and what not to believe. And so yes, I do think that Desmond continued taking the vaccine. I think he continued to avoid going outside without a hazmat suit at least. We actually see that he answered Faraday's knock on the door in season 5 in the hazmat suit. The fact that Desmond is the one answering the door tells us that that is sometime after Kelvin has died. And yeah, which if he believed that that there was no risk breathing the open air, he wouldn't have worn the suit to answer the door. That's basically what I have to add. Yeah, so I hope that helps. All right, I think that pretty much covers everything. Obviously, as the first episode in this follow-up series, this was largely experimental. Hopefully you guys found it worth watching if you stuck around to the end here. Yeah, if you have any notes on maybe how I could do this thing a little better, feel free to comment that. Yeah, or any other thoughts, questions, whatever. Maybe a year from now, I'll do a follow-up on the follow-up. I think I'm joking. But my second video, my second Getting Lost video, came out April 2nd. I managed to do it 8 days after this first one came out. Pretty quick turnaround back then. So yeah, that means the second installment of this subseries will be out April 2nd, or should be out April 2nd. That is what I'm going to shoot for. And that is, of course, assuming that you guys don't hate this. If nobody watches it, or it gets a bunch of dislikes, or comments saying what was the point of that, then obviously I will abandon this. But no, yeah, like I said, I think that what will make these videos worth watching is the perspectives that you guys contribute. Because again, I don't think there's a single video that I have on my channel that you guys haven't contributed interesting input into. So yeah, like I said, let me know what you guys think. But yeah, I should see you next week in Going Back number 2, which will address Getting Lost number 2, Nonprofit. Here's the link if you want to watch that before I do the follow-up video. But okay, I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I'll see you next time.
Oh, hello there. If you're like me, you can't get enough of Lost. So if you'd like to be notified when more videos like this one arrive, just click right up here to subscribe. In the meantime, if you'd like to check out other videos like this one, just click right up here. Or, if you'd like to check out a fun talk show filmed in an abandoned DHARMA broadcast station, just click right over here. And as always, remember that this channel is like the island. It wants you to come back.